I tell companies up front, I'm like, are you serious or not? Right? Because they call us, oh, well, it's just George Floyd happened. We got to do some racial equity work. We want to be an anti-racist organization. It's top priority, blah, blah, blah. And then we give them our rates, some of them, and they push it back. Oh, can I get a discount? Can I get this? I'm like, first of all, I could charge double what we charge. And second of all, you said you were serious. So if you're serious, you got to put your money where your mouth is. And if you're serious, it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. It's not a check the box situation. And so I tell them, do you want to have impact or not? When I'm in the room with the audience, I level set expectation. I'm like, look, don't expect all this stuff to change in a couple of hours. But if you really want to change, that's going to take much longer.
Peace, and welcome to another episode of Cook on Monday Morning. At Cook on Monday Morning, we are building lives that make us excited about Monday morning. We believe that if you can own Monday morning, you can own the week. If you can own the week, you can own the year. And if you change your year, you can change your life. Today we have with us Dr. Bryant Marks, really accomplished, esteemed professor at the great Morehouse University. I'm unfortunately not a Morehouse man, but he not only is one, he teaches there now. I have a few other accomplishments or past work I'll list off. As a former senior advisor to the White House Initiative on historically Black colleges and universities. Mm-hmm. He is a commissioner for the White House Initiative on educational excellence for African Americans, the director of programs on Black male achievement at Morehouse, and the assistant and associate professor for the Department of Psychology at Morehouse. I got the great fortune of meeting this dynamic man in Southern California last year before COVID, and heard him incredibly move our audience about related to his training on implicit bias and the charge of his work that he currently is doing now. So with that was a long intro, but Dr. Bryant Marks, thank you.
No problem at all. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So the last thing I mentioned was like implicit bias, which has sort of taken on multiple different iterations in terms of like its embrace within school systems and within the criminal justice system. Can you, for people that may not know, just explain what implicit bias is and what your current work on that looks like?
Well, thanks for having me. Good to be with you, and hello to everyone that's watching and following. So you think about implicit bias, think about it this way. As you live your life, day to day from birth until now, you're taking in the world, you're taking in information about the world. Some things you take in repeatedly. Some things are about objects, some things about people. So if you see certain people in certain groups, or certain people in certain roles, certain people in certain traits over and over again, your mind sort of locks it in. So if I say, for example, police officer, you think male, doesn't make you a bad person. You just might have seen more male police officers than female officers. And so you come to associate certain groups and certain traits, certain groups and certain roles. And that's at the heart of implicit bias. So the technical definition of implicit bias is when a stereotype, an association of a group with the trait, can affect how you think, feel, and behave at a subconscious level, right? And so stereotypes form over your lifetime simply due to overexposure to groups and traits. So that's as simple as the example about the police officer, but also if you're thinking about, if I say to you, priest, certain things come to mind. If I say to you, judge, certain things come to mind. So when I give you certain categories or groups, a set of information is going to come to mind because you've been exposed to it. And that could apply to social groups, Black, white, Hispanic, Asian, male, female, different groups as well. So in our society, if certain groups are associated with more negative traits, while other groups are associated with more positive traits, they're going to experience different life outcomes. So implicit bias in our work, we look at primarily at criminal justice, healthcare, education, social services, and the corporate space to look at how our biases can play out in a systemic way that affects the quality of life of different groups. We focus more on race, but we also talk about gender, we talk about age, we talk about obesity, attractiveness, having an accent versus not. So there's many different bases of inclusion or exclusion, which can be the basis of bias. But we look at it through the lens of race, given what's happened in our country historically, as well as what's going on today.
So going on today, so we're in quarantine. Restrictions have sort of lifted. The George Floyd murder happened earlier this year. And even for me, someone who's not as well versed in this work as you are, I got hit up repeatedly to do trainings, and I was like, I don't do this shit. I don't do no trainings on bias. Like, what has happened for your work since, like, as of late? What's going on?
So no, I mean, it's been a significant demand. I mean, I'm booked out for several months, but you can still email us now. You know, we can
You have.
Yeah, we have a team of trainers. So I've been doing diversity training in some form for 20 years. Go back to when I was even just coming out of grad school. So I was doing diversity training off and on for several years. And then about 5 years ago, 4 to 5 years ago, when I started working with the Obama administration, my appointment with the White House Initiative on Historically Black Colleges, I took leave from Morehouse. This is the fall of 2015. Took leave from Morehouse and moved up to DC. So I was housed at the U.S. Department of Education, but also worked at the Department of Justice and the White House on several projects, including My Brother's Keeper and the President's Task Force on 21st Century Policing. And so what happened was I was the White House's official implicit bias trainer when it came to law enforcement, following the release of the 21st Century Policing Report that the Department of Justice put out. And so what happened is these police chiefs of command staff would come to the White House for some briefings. And so I provided implicit bias training. It's about an hour and a half or so. And those chiefs began to invite me out to their respective police departments to train the entire police forces. So even prior to the virus, I'd already trained about 25,000 police officers across the country. I touched, 1,500, 2,000 police departments. So we're already doing this work. And then when George Floyd occurred a few months ago, it just shot up because we were doing in-person trainings, but then we transitioned to virtual. And so you had a lot of corporations, a lot of organizations, wanting to sort of take a stand on social justice and racial equity. And so, demand increased significantly. So our business fluctuates in terms of the percentage of law enforcement, healthcare, corporations, it just sort of varies. But there has been a significant uptick since George Floyd, and not just in law enforcement. A lot of corporations, organizations, nonprofits have been having training as well.
Can you comment on the whole defunding police wave? Like how you think about that? What that means for you?
I have to be honest, that phrase defund the police, when I first heard it, knowing cops as I knew it was going to be problematic. Mm-hmm. I understood the intent behind it, and I agree with the intent, right? Because I've trained crisis intervention teams. So if you have an incident and you have a cop show up, a paramedic show up, and a social worker show up, or a mental health professional, that's your ideal. That's what crisis intervention teams do. A lot of police departments don't have the resources for that. And so what happens is a cop shows up and has to serve all three roles, and they may not be trained to do so. So I understand the notion of wanting funding to go towards a system where you had a more comprehensive approach to engage in the public. Absolutely, I get that. But the phrase defund was the problem, because a lot of folks don't notice most police budgets, 80, 90% are just salaries and pensions, 80 to 90%. So it's not a lot of fat to trim. So we need to trim the fat and transfer money. It's not a lot of fat there. A few departments may have something you can cut. A program here or there. But many of them, it's already pretty lean. So I understood the sentiment, the intent behind it. I completely agree, and I get it. The phrase defunding, it almost meaning like take funding away from police and put it somewhere else. And there was never, from my perspective, a consensus understanding of how much that meant. Along the continuum of defunding, are you saying take all the money away, take some of it away, take most of it away? I don't know. But I do know from the police perspective, that's a challenge, just logistically. But from an impact perspective and an engagement perspective, I agree with it. I get it.
Yeah, I think the association, everything that kind of happens with like politics or waves, there could be multiple meanings that people ascribe to a phrase, and the broadness of it probably captured people that had different sentiments. Like some people want to abolish the police. Mm-hmm. And some people want to redivert resources from the police, but the whole defund thing captured all of them. So like the intent, the budget intent could sound like how you understand it. I know a lot of people, a percentage of people that wanted the police to be completely eliminated, which was, I always found a little problematic and kind of confusing. Because it's like when the crisis occurs, like what should happen, what does happen, what can happen without some type of intervention from officers there. But like you, I understand the sentiment with the way that you describe it. I just need that more people were sort of behind it than just the folks that wanted to like decrease the budget a little bit. When you hear the phrase, there are some good cops, how do you respond to that?
There are, I think, many good cops. I think policing is like many other large industries where you're going to have a variability in performance, competence, and skills. I mean, it's very, you got to understand, there's 18,000 police departments in the United States with varying levels of training. I mean, there's no national standards around policing in terms of the requirements. So right now, in some states, you have to be 21 when you're sworn. In 4 states right now, you be 18 years old sworn in. What you got to understand about that, the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain most responsible for critical thinking and decision-making, doesn't fully form until your mid-20s. So you got 18-year-olds with a gun and a badge with impulse control issues because they're adolescents, they have impulse control issues, underdeveloped brain, 12 weeks of training on the street. Not old enough to drink, but could take somebody's life. That sort of thing is tough, right? Because it's so much variability. So yeah, there's certain people that shouldn't be cops. I've talked to cops and say, yeah, certain people should be cops. And I asked them, do you vouch for police across the country? I said, across the country, I wouldn't necessarily vouch for everybody in my department. So cops, no. You talk to them one-on-one, they'll tell you, yeah, not everybody's cut out for this. Everybody's built for this, for a variety of reasons. Now, to know the actual percentage of people that should not be policed, I think that's probably an unknowable thing. Do they exist? Yes, right? A lot of folks join policing because the benefits are great. The retirement is great. You can join, 18, 25 years in, retire, get a full package and have a second career. I get it. But in terms of having the skills, the competence, the interpersonal acumen, they would acknowledge they don't all have that to the level that they should.
Yeah. That's the case with every profession too. Just like, I mean, you just said that, like with education, which, is a large focus of your work. How would you break that down? Because I know your implicit bias training has its own array of types of groups, but when it comes to your work, educating and teaching, what percentage of that is sort of your daily life right now?
Well, this is so we're full time. So we run it. The National Training Institute of Race and Equity is a full-bodied diversity training entity.
Got it.
And so I'm still a faculty at Morehouse, still have my tenure, but I'm not teaching. Okay. And so, we have an arrangement, and actually a percentage of our revenue goes to Morehouse. So we work that out so that they benefit, and we push the brand, and we include Morehouse in our trainings. Like when you leave our trainings, you know about implicit bias, but you also know about Morehouse and what it takes to improve the lives of Black males. You're gonna know all of those. So yeah, I would say right now, I'd say if I had to break it down in our 4 or 5 sweet spots, criminal justice, so I'd say probably maybe 20% criminal justice, 10% healthcare, maybe 30-40% education. Yeah, probably the rest between policing and corporations and nonprofits. So it's a mix. I mean, the social services thing we do. Oh, let me back up. We train a lot of city and county governments. Like we'll train all the county and city employees for a particular place. Like we have the master agreement for Los Angeles County. So Los Angeles County had to train all their people. It's 108,000 employees. We train about 60,000 of the employees. And Los Angeles County is 38 different departments. So one day you might be training social services. The next day it's weights and measures. The next day is beaches and harbors. I mean, it's all types of, units. But yeah, so it's quite diverse still, but it just ebbs and flows.
Well, what about your routine, like your process for how you're approaching the week? Like how much of it is the business development versus like actually in-class training? So now my balance is off because of the demand and people requesting me as a trainer. I'm training like 2 to 3 days. 2 to 3 sessions per day. And the virtual sessions, right? So the irony is with this virtual piece, we've increased capacity because I'm not on a plane, train, automobile travel between cities. So I could train 3 cities in one day, quite efficient. But the demand has picked up so much where, cause I got 2 books I need to write. I got some video, we're working on a learning management platform. So in a couple of months, we're gonna have a lot of this online. And so my balance is not good right now because the long-term play really is the learning management platform. It's the automated approach where, I'm sleeping and people are taking courses. That's what we want. But the live trainings are sort of like a commercial or sort of a way to feed them into the learning management platform once it's done.
but I'm not where I should be. I'd say 80% of my workday is actual training. And then 10% is meetings, calls. Another 10% is some creative videotaping, working on LMS. But it's not. It's a funky sort of situation now. But these are good problems. These are good problems. The demand is high. Yeah. But as an entrepreneur, we know this, that sometimes the short-term sacrifice for the long-term model, that's going to be lucrative. Right. You just got to make time for it. And I just got to do better at that.
And 2 books. How do you write 2 books at the same time? I don't know how to write one.
No, I got 2 books in my head.
Or this year?
No. This is my first book, but okay. I have 2 books in my head. I haven't had time to write them yet. Like I have an outline in my head because I'm training so much and doing everything else. I can't even get the time, right? So it's crazy because of my trainings. I promote the books of like my colleagues that Implicit Bias, and I've easily between the 2 of them sold at least 50,000 copies. Easy for them because I train 5,000 to 10,000 people a week, right? And even before the virus hit. I was, so because I want the people to have good science. So I promote 2, and I don't get a cut or anything. I just recommend these books. And I'll go into an organization after the first training. They say, give me the books you recommended for all of our employees. Like all of them. I'm like, man, that could have been me. So, yeah. So I haven't written them yet. I have them in my head. My goal was to take off a month from mid-December to mid-January to focus on making some progress on one of them. But those dates are filling up. Like, yeah, these clients are aggressive and they're willing to pay a premium. So it's tough.
Yeah. Well, all the people Cook on Monday Morning Show. So very fortunate that we have a few minutes of this brother's time. I can vouch for. I want to ask about sort of the results and the impact and what the ongoing. I'm sure it kind of looks different, but your talk in San Diego last year was very interactive, informative, inspiring. And it challenged, I think, me and other people listening. So it was definitely an experience that I think for folks that were already committed to the field, like wanted to do more with you, like there was like a level of engagement. And I think you kind of presented where things are in a way that prompted continuous growth for whoever was listening. So what does the progression look like? Like, is it like a one-time thing? Is it like 6 months out? Like, how does it work? And what are some of the results of the engagement?
So our full cycle is probably 18 months. All right. And so we start off with 2 content sessions, trainings. So one is what we call awareness training. The other is what we call mitigation training. So awareness is what it sounds like, right? We raise your awareness about implicit bias. We talk about the causes, the consequences, give you the research, and we give you recommendations as well. Things you can do as an individual once you're done, right? Like concrete recommendations, things people can start that night. We're very much about impact. And so we're going to give you stuff that's not super macro. It's like, what is a micro action I can take when I'm done? That's what we tend to do. The other one is mitigation training, and that focuses on changing behavior. And we talk about organizational change, right? What can be done at the organizational level? Hiring, promotion, talent development, exit, strategic planning, performance evaluation. So we talk a lot about the organization and what they can do, in addition to some additional personal recommendations. So those are the sort of 2 content ones up front. Then we say, okay, we know what we can do at the personal level. We know what you do at the organizational level. So we have the set of recommendations that the science said should work. Said is like 15, 20 recommendations. And we can work with you through an implementation phase. So you can say, okay, over the next 12 months, we're going to implement one of these recommendations per month. Dr. Marks and the entire team, National Training Institute of Race and Equity, the entire team, can you work with us as we implement these recommendations to make sure we're doing it right, to make sure we're measuring the impact as we go along. So that's your 12-month sort of engagement where we're hands-on with the client, walking them through the implementation. And then there's a post-test. Now, I should have mentioned this. On the front end, with a full cycle, we have an evaluation phase where we collect new data or we measure existing data. So for example, police department. We say, okay, police department, let's look at your outcomes in terms of arrests, citizen complaints, tickets, citations. That's vary by race, gender, age. So we take a deep dive into existing data, okay? Then you have the intervention. And then at month, 14 months out, 16 months out, when they've have the recommendations implemented over that year, and have some time to let them sort of sink in. Then we do a post-test, and we compare it to the pre-test to see if there's been any measurable change. Now, to your point about the impact that it's had, it's varied because most of our clients up until very recently have not gone through the full cycle. They'll get the awareness training. They may get the mitigation training, and then they'll say, well, we got it from here. Especially if it's our Fortune 500 companies. We have several Fortune 500 companies. And they'll have a CDO, a Chief Diversity Officer. And it's sort of like their shop is their thing. They're bringing me in as a subject matter expert, but they have their own plan. So we do the awareness training, mitigation, then they'll still take it from here. And so I'm not involved in implementation in a follow-up phase. That's typically the case. So I can't give you long-term impact data because most of our clients have not implemented the recommendations over the long term with quality control, while I can say what worked and what didn't work in a concrete way. Last point, what I will say is self-report. I'll get officers who email me, hey, Dr. Marks, I was in your session last year at LAPD. When you presented, I wasn't really open to it, but I was on the street the other day. I used what you said, it really helped me. I'll get a lot of that, where people are self-reporting impact. But in terms of a systemic measure of it, have not been able to do it.
Well, what's that like for you to not see it through? I mean, it sounds like you
frustrating.
Yeah.
Because I tell companies up front, I'm like, are you serious or not? Right? Because they call us, oh, well, since George Floyd happened, we got to do some racial equity work. We want to be an anti-racist organization. It's top priority, blah, blah, blah. And then we give them our rates, some of them, and they push it back. Oh, can I get a discount? Can I get this? I'm like, first of all, I could charge double what we charge. We charge a very reasonable rate for the quality we deliver. And then second of all, you said you were serious. So if you're serious, you got to put your money where your mouth is. And if you're serious, it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. It's not a check the box situation, right? You just have your training, say you had it. Oh, we brought Dr. Marks, White House, all that. That's cute. That looks good. But if you want to have impact, it's a marathon. It's a longer term. And so I tell them, do you want to have impact or not? I mean, doing the awareness training is better than not. So it's something rather than nothing. Mm-hmm. But when I'm in the room with the audience, I level set expectation. I'm like, look, don't expect all this stuff to change in a couple of hours. Right? I can help you with the process, but if you really want to change, that's going to take much longer. Mm-hmm. So it can be a bit frustrating, especially when new clients ask, well, like you're asking, well, what worked? Tell me organization where you saw the impact and so forth. And it's difficult. But that's with any diversity trainer, by the way. Mm-hmm. Right? Whether it's me or somebody else, implicit bias training, especially with implicit bias, the long-term impact of the recommendations implemented with quality control is extremely rare. Or there's confounding variables. For example, police department. The thing about police, and your people need to understand this. The thing about policing with training, they get a lot of training, most of them, right? Mm-hmm. So 1 week is implicit bias. Next week is procedural justice. Next week is de-escalation. They get stuff. So I might come at a certain point, a year later, I come back saying, hey, I want to measure did implicit bias training work. They've had training on 8 other topics. So can I isolate it and say it was just implicit bias, or was it in combination with these others? Mm-hmm. And it can be difficult to do.
Well, that's why I commend you, and that's why I can't do it. Because I mean, I definitely want somebody that like understands the dynamics and continuing to push, even though there are like shortcomings. But when the people that reached out to me, and you've been deep in this work for a long time, that's what I anticipated would have happened. Because if the decision maker, the CEO or whoever is in charge says, hey, let's bring somebody in, mm-hmm. They make it tax somebody to find a vendor. You would be maybe one of a few options. Mm-hmm. And then if you give them a rate, they may feel the person that was tasked with it, like they're not the decider. So they're gotta like, oh, I can't bring a price like this to the person that's a decider. Mm-hmm. It'd be easier if you just spoke to the decider, Right. But then it wears off and like people get uncomfortable and then they don't want to, and then other work priorities get in the way. And then it kind of like gets pushed off to the side. So that's how I envision the progression. And it sounds like some of that is the case.
Yeah, well, the thing is, what I tell people now in this window of time, right, George Floyd and the country loving Black folks and race and equity, and people say to me, well, is implicit bias training a fad? I'm like, no, we've been studying this for 50 years. It's not a fad. But what I do say is, I wonder if this window of people loving Black folks and want to do racial equity work, is that a fad? Mm-hmm. That's my concern. Mm-hmm. Is that 9-12 months from now, the winds of change will blow and we'll be on to something else. And all this racial equity stuff will go away, right? So what I tell my partners, if you're serious, make it stick. Put it in your 5-year strategic plan. So an equity initiative. with a budget. So every year there's a line item so people know that you're serious. Keep having your standing meetings. Have your newsletter. Have a little equity corner in your newsletter. Like put it in, institutionalize it so that when this window is closed, you're still doing the work because you evaluate on principle, not based upon timing, right? Not what's going on in the country and having to appease some of your frontline workers who may be pushing you, okay? So yeah, I mean, it's going to vary. But for some people, they're just doing this to cover themselves and to check the box. And I understand that, right? But other folks, and there are a few organizations that are really serious.
Has it worn off?
I don't,
Well, your demand is still high, so maybe it hasn't worn off.
So my demand is still high. I think, because we're booked out until the spring of next year, and people will wait. Like I have a team. We have 10 trainers in New York, 4 in Atlanta, 4 in LA. So I have a team of trainers. And so I'll say, look, I'm booked out, me, Bryant Marks, but we can get some other trainers. And so they're like, no, they're willing. Some of them will say we need something now, and they're willing to do a joint session. So because our sessions are virtual, they'll say, okay, you can piggyback us on an existing session. Yeah, we just do that. We just add them in. They just won't get to give like open remarks and all of that, but we can add them in. I mean, that's those who are really pressed. They was like, look, we'll just take what we can get. Others will say, well, we'll wait for you. We'll wait 3 or 4 months. And it's not that our other trainers aren't good. They are very good. But if they've seen me somewhere and they said, we want you to do it, okay, fine. But no, the demand is still there. It hasn't waned. We still get every day, still get requests. And we don't advertise at all, by the way, which is horrible, but it's all word of mouth. Right. And so that's what it is. But even before the virus, we were rolling.
I'm excited to hear about when it comes out, what the online platform is going to look like. And I know a lot of being in Silicon Valley, I know a lot of people sort of in the VC space and in the software engineering space. Do you have a launch date for the online platform?
Nah, I mean, we're going to try to go to beta with some of our partners, probably I'd say late November, where they can sort of kick the tires and try it out. We wanted to get it before the end of the calendar year. I'm pushing, but it's going to be tough because a lot of it is on me. I got to videotape a lot of it. So think about it like this. Are you familiar with Masterclass? The website, yeah. Sort of like that, right? You click on the topic. It's like 14 lessons. Each of them are like 10 to 12 minutes, sort of short. And it takes a fair amount of editing. We're going to have, learning checks where you have to answer questions. And so I'm the bottleneck because I'm training so much. And so now once I get some of my other trainers to come in and they'll relieve me to a certain extent, that's going to help. So in the weekends, I just got to kill it over the weekend. Like, because the goal is to have about 20 courses up. So implicit bias is just one. Like in the world of implicit bias, there's awareness, there's mitigation, there's reducing bias to specific groups. I mean, so it's going to be a full sort of suite of courses there. And so we're hoping that the sort of minimum viable product, the awareness mitigation, and the allyship course done by late November, early December is the goal.
Yeah, I have a contact that it sounds like you're committed to the video process, but if you ever want to talk, I have a friend that does trainings for enterprise companies. It's called Avenue. I'll shoot your assistant a message about it. If you ever want to talk to him, let me know.
Okay, no, absolutely. But we're open to different, format.
I want to talk a little bit about family and some of the stuff you do outside of work.
Okay.
You're also an ordained minister. Is that correct?
Yes.
What is your sort of spiritual or religious work look like right now?
So it's interesting because you got the COVID thing and then the business piece. So even before the virus, so I was an associate pastor at a Baptist church for several years. This is in Decatur outside of Atlanta. And then I went to the White House. And so when I moved to the White House, I had to sort of, I couldn't fulfill those responsibilities. So with the White House, came back in the spring, the late fall of 2016. And then so we were back at that church, but then the senior pastor, he left. And then I started traveling like crazy. So my wife and I decided, okay, let's pull back from you being associate pastor because you're on the road too much. We were members of a church. And so the sort of ministry, if you will, my classroom sort of expanded, my pulpit expanded, where a lot of my trainings, like if you listen to my trainings, sometimes at certain points they feel like sermons, right? I'm given biblical principles, see, a lot of my biblical principles align with the science anyway, so it makes it easy. I'm a scientist and a preacher. I'm a person of faith and of facts, is what I say.
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel in this season that God has given me a way to communicate with many different audiences. Because this is all God. Like, what I do is so funny. What I do, same thing I'm doing at Morehouse all my career, right? Mm-hmm. But I put a little extra in it. I make it unique, and I use I use videos and everything else. I freestyle a little bit. So I bring me to the space, but it is the essence of me. And God gave me a series of experiences where now I can step into a room full of all white officers and speak to them in a way that connects and still keep my authentic self. I'm a Black man, born in the Bronx, raised in Queens. NYPD was active. I came of age in the height of the crack epidemic in New York City. Lots going on back there. So I've seen a lot of different things. I'm the youngest of 3 boys. My middle brother is an attorney. He was assistant district attorney for Fulton County, Atlanta. So my middle brother spent his adult life locking people up. My oldest brother is locked up. Or should I say he was in and out of the system. He's been out for about 3 years now. But so for me, the work-life balance, the spiritual piece, it's all integrated. Like what I do, if you come to my trainings, you hearing my story. I'm talking about my brothers, about my wife, my spiritual. I mean, you see, it's all there. Mm-hmm. And so it's been very interesting. I used to be a rapper when I was young. So sometimes I ask you to freestyle or whatever, I do that. So I bring all of me to the table. Mm-hmm. When a balance falls short, I have 2 young kids. One's a 6-year-old, one's 13. I have a grown daughter. But the young kids, that balance is tough. I mean, it's even though I'm home working out of my basement office, mm-hmm. I'm gonna be working 12 hours a day. Mm-hmm. They'll come down, give me a hug, hey, and then I'm back to work. Mm-hmm. That's not good, right? I need more time. And my justification is, well, I'm building intergenerational wealth for them to make it easy. But for a lot of kids, how do they spell love? Time, right? I just got to give them more time. Mm-hmm. And so I'm trying to balance the spiritual, the impact, because they, if we're out there, we have these always involved shootings, unarmed Black folks. I'm trying to do my part to contribute there, trying to touch these cops, trying to raise the kids. So mm-hmm. I don't have the secret sauce yet. I'm trying to balance it like everybody else.
Yeah, and I think the secret sauce is kind of a myth, I think that when people find their purpose, like that's really what I celebrate and what's beautiful. Other things get sacrificed. I don't have children, so I don't have to look at that sacrifice. I don't have a significant other, but I hear that and I'm just like, but you found your purpose though. There's beauty in that, and obviously because you're committing to it, there's it's life-giving. In many ways for you. And I can hear how palpable the excitement is and how you talk about your work. The country is about to go. So this will be released after the election. During the debates, and I think in some news reports, the president talked about defunding implicit bias or racial sensitivity training. Thoughts?
So no, we were affected by that. So what happened was we have 3 clients that are federal agencies. And all 3 of them emailed like, hey, got this letter. And they sent the letter. And the letter's crazy, right? So the letter's like different bullet points. But at the end of the day, what they were saying was no training can talk about the United States of America or any racial group in a way that says they're inherently racist or evil. I said, well, we don't do that anyway. But the letter still read, it was strange. It sort of read like he talks. You know what I'm saying? Like, you read something, sounds like he's talking, it's like the grammar. So anyway, yeah. So we did have to make a slight adjustment, but nothing too major. I mean, because we do give historical context. And so we talk about the history of America being, having bias from the beginning. And we talk about it in a very explicit way. So for some of the agencies, they said, well, we know that you need context. So can you make the bigger points without all the details of it? I was like, okay, fine. So I was willing to adjust in that way. But the point is that you can't look at bias today without looking at it yesterday, that this country has been riddled with bias from the beginning. So I do make that point. Mm-hmm. But, he's like, you never know if people are watching, they may be recording and this and that. Fine. And then we don't know if after the election, because it's an interesting thing, if Trump loses, right, how likely are they to enforce this stuff? Like all diversity trainers are going to listen in to make sure, okay? And then some agencies say, well, you know what? We're just going to wait till January 20th. So they can just put it off, and so then they're clear. If he wins, then that's something different. Again, we don't call the United States inherently racist or evil. That's word for word. And we don't call white people inherently racist or evil, or any group for that matter. Mm-hmm. So we're okay. But if you're not training, you may feel uncomfortable now and then because we're going to push you. Mm-hmm. You have to own the fact that we live in a society where certain groups are favored of other groups. That's just what it is.
Can you be politically involved, or are you like staying out of politics? What's your?
So I'm apolitical in our training. So I'm an independent, right? Mm-hmm. So the Obama administration, I voted for Obama. And so in terms of this election, I'm voting for Biden. Mm-hmm. But in terms of the trainings, no, I'm apolitical. Like I tried not to, because I train a lot of cops and all that. And I tell them I was with the Obama administration, right? I put it out there. And so they'll assume, certain things about me, some of which may be true or not true. That's the only sort of political thing I sort of bring in about me, mm-hmm. because I use that, because I give them a bullet point list about me. Born in the Bronx, raised in Queens, went to Morehouse grad school, Obama administration, Morehouse College, I get boom, 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 boom. And then I ask them a poll question later on. I say, what was your initial gut reaction towards me when I mentioned that I work with the Obama administration? I put it as a question on the screen and they could answer on their phones. The response options are very negative, no reaction, positive, very positive. Recently, with the police department, the range will be anywhere on the negative side, negative reaction, with police, anywhere from 30 to 60. Mm-hmm. So it's a negative reaction. Mm-hmm. And so I tell them, y'all don't know me, right? I just gave you my intro the first 5 minutes. And I'm asking this question. Y'all don't know me that well, mm-hmm. but you may associate certain traits with the Obama administration or certain traits with the people who work for the Obama administration, but mm-hmm. you don't know me, mm-hmm. right? And I use that, right? Because I tell them we're living in a hyper-partisan country where I understand Republicans, Democrats may not even talk to each other in certain spaces. I get that, okay? But you prejudge me. That's a form of bias. If you'd have a negative or positive reaction, simply based upon this group and that affiliation. But yeah, I don't talk politics in depth. A Trump thing, it's at this point, the evidence speaks for itself in terms of who he is, what he believes, and so forth. And for me to risk getting into an argument with somebody who supports Trump, knowing that the evidence is minimal to support a positive perception, it's not worth it. And then the rest of the audience is going to witness that. Yeah. Right. But our trainings in general, because a lot of folks bring us in, they want us to talk about the science of implicit bias, mm-hmm. Not necessarily get all political. And we understand that.
There's so much more I want to talk to you about, but we only have a few more minutes left. And I have like a rapid fire portion that I do. Okay. So, you ready for it?
Yep.
Do you meditate?
No, but I pray.
Do you have a motto?
Yes. I'd say perfection is the goal, but excellence is acceptable.
What personal weakness can you forgive in someone?
Being unhealthy.
What's one book you would recommend?
The Purple Cow.
Oh, Seth Godin.
Mm-hmm.
Last final question. Your house is on fire, your family and your pets are out. What's 3 things you grab?
For my house, 3 things I grab, probably photo books of my parents and grandparents, because I don't have them scanned the way I need to. My probably my laptop, and cash. I got money in my house. Not a lot. Don't come rob me. All right. I don't got a lot. I got a little bit. Because when they're predicting the crash and all this other stuff. Yeah, don't come rob me now.
Okay.
Right?
We don't know your address. We'll keep it that way.
It's not a lot. Right. But that's very interesting. I never actually thought about that. That's a good question.
Okay. One good question for my discussion with Dr. Bryant Marks. I appreciate you, sir. It was a pleasure to have you on.
All right, no problem. I appreciate the invitation. Glad to be with you.
Peace, and thank you for listening to another episode of Cook on Monday Morning. At Cook on Monday Morning, we are building lives that make us excited about Monday morning. We believe that if we can own Monday morning, we can own the week. If we can own the week, we can own the year. And if we change our year, we can change our lives. I'd like to thank the good brother, Dr. Bryant Marks, for sharing his experience, story, and impact around the implicit bias work he does for public institutions and the private sector across the country. Is incredibly important work. I hope you enjoyed the discussion, and we'll, consider reaching out to him if you or your company has been having these conversations on how to bring bias to the forefront and resolve it in a way that better serves the people that you do business with or in community with. I'd also like to thank, of course, our listeners. Thank you. Please consider subscribing to Cook on Monday Morning, the YouTube channel, if you haven't already. I'm grateful to you, and I appreciate your continued support. Share the podcast with a friend. Help us grow our community of doers. And if you're listening via audio, also hit subscribe or rate and review it on Apple if that's how you enjoy the podcast. Now, if you're interested in starting your own podcast, I wrote an article. It's called How to Start a Podcast During a Pandemic. You can find the description in the box below. It goes over the equipment that we use and some book recommendations that could be helpful in considering an approach for you. Cook on Monday Morning is a product of the Luther Harris Holding Company. We work in partnership to create solutions that drive social impact. We do that by building strategic partnerships between businesses and government. We recruit diversity talents at high impact roles, and we help companies drive impact in the communities where they do business. If you'd like to learn more, send me an email. I'm at info@stevoncook.com. I'd like to thank the people that make our podcast possible. Our videographer, David Topete. Thank you, sir. Our copy editor, Fernando Sico Marquez and Devin Sketchinger. Thank you both. Now I get up every morning with the intention to create value and showcase my love to the people that keep our cities moving. They are our teachers, school lunch workers, custodians, social workers, firefighters, police officers, EMT workers, garbage collectors, bus drivers, and nurses. They are our employers, the folks creating jobs and keeping our economy moving. They are our gig workers, stocking our shelves, driving our ride shares, delivering our food. To all of you, this podcast is for you. You live in places like San Francisco, Oakland, Richmond, Antioch, San Mateo, Los Angeles, Dallas, Houston, New Orleans, Baton Rouge, Miami, Orlando, the Carolinas, Virginia Beach, Milwaukee, Kansas City, Cleveland, Detroit, Harlem, Brooklyn, and also shout out to our folks on the continent of Africa, Nigeria, and also, in the islands of Jamaica, Kenya, and Ethiopia. To all of you, this podcast is for you. This message is touching the world and will continue to because of you. Until we meet again. Peace, and we out.